Good morning, Flavio. Today we will have a podcast in English for the first time. And it's my pleasure to have you here because you're actually my boss in the ethics department. So.
I wouldn't say, it's a pleasure to be here. I wouldn't say boss, we are a group, we are a team, so we are all together in it, yeah.
So this podcast belongs to a series we call Inescapable.
Indefugibles, el podcast de la Càtedra d'Ètica i Pensament Cristià de l'IQS, amb Xavier Casanovas i Oriol Quintana. Un podcast amb la col·laboració de Catalunya Religió.
So I guess I should present you, Flavio. Flavio is one of the most important economists in Brazil, and we are lucky enough to have him here, living in Spain, living in Barcelona, and working here at IQS. He teaches actually in Cambridge, but he decided to live in Barcelona out of love because he's married to a Catalan woman. So we're here now today to talk about the polemics between Freeman and Friedman, or Friedman and Freeman, should we say, which is a polemic related to the corporate social responsibility, so the responsibility that the companies have towards society in general. Flavio, can you tell us a little bit about who Friedman was?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your kind introduction. Now, the first thing I should say about Friedman is that he was one of the most influential economists we had in the last century. And that happened not only because he founded a school, so when we talk about the Chicago School of Economics, we quite often would refer to Friedman. There are others like Gary Becker who are important, but Friedman was the central figure for that, especially for macroeconomics, but also because he was such a good communicator. So he engaged with students, he engaged with policymakers. He was able to write about so many different things. So Friedman, first of all, was, I would say, one of the most influential figures, and especially in terms of liberal economics.
And he also won a Nobel Prize, didn't he?
Oh, he did, yes. He was one of the first to get, I think still in the 70s, to get a Nobel Prize, yes.
So Friedman is important for us today because he wrote against the corporate social responsibility. And how is that? What is all about?
He was seeing the beginning of what we call corporate social responsibility in the late 60s, early 70s. And then he was straight to the point. Now, as I said, he's such a good communicator. So he went straight to the point and he said, look, we can talk about personal responsibilities that individuals would have, but we cannot talk about responsibilities of companies because companies, they are not real persons. They are artificial persons. And as such, they have artificial responsibilities. What he was trying to explain was that companies, they are made of people getting together. And when we are talking about managers, they are actually there to work hired by the owners of the company. And the owners, they want to have their profits. So for him, the managers were there to generate profits. Now, if the managers decide that they are going to allocate the resources of the company just to try to do CSR, to try to do good, they might be spending the money of the owners without knowing. So that is the interesting thing, because he used what we call the asymmetric information theory. Mm-hmm. Now, the asymmetric information theory, it's, I joke, I say after supply and demand, that's one of the most interesting things that economists have done, because it explains that every time we engage in an economic relationship with someone, we can define who is the principal and who is the agent. Yeah. And the principal is that person that normally would hire an agent. So if you go to your mechanic, if you go to your dentist, if you go to your plumber, if you go to your company, then we have to establish whether that person has or not complete information about what the agent is doing. And quite often this is not the case. Quite often when you go to a doctor, you have no idea, you are feeling ill, and then your doctor will tell you. The plumber
and you have
as
to,
well.
And you have to trust him.
And you have to trust.
Because you don't know. That's the asymmetry of information.
Yeah.
He has the information,
Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah. But then you need something else. You need that if their interests are not aligned, then they might do something because it's better for them, not because that would be better for you.
Sorry, Flavio, and maybe this is not the point, this is not the topic now, but every time I hear that someone comes to you and tells you that this is a win-win situation, are you saying that we shouldn't trust that? Because...
Well, depending. What you have to think is whether the other person would have an incentive to do perhaps what would be the best thing for you. Now, in the case of a doctor, it is very interesting because back in 1963, Kenneth Arrow wrote a paper saying we don't have market solutions for that, for this relationship, because the level of asymmetric information is so high that if the doctor wants to give drugs to you or a medicine to you, just because the pharmaceutical industry will fund his or her research or vacation, you have no idea.
There's no much you can do about it. You have to trust again.
You have to trust. It's a kind of extra market solution. And you are going to trust because there are institutions that are controlling the doctors. Right. Or we don't have for plumbers or mechanics, but we don't. Yeah, we need it.
At the end, if a mechanic is scamming people all the time, he will have a bad reputation, and then the other mechanics will control him somehow.
Yeah. Now, Friedman's point was very straightforward. Now, managers, if they start doing that, they might doing that for their interests. And then they might undermine the interests of the shareholders. And because of that, the managers will get the money damaging the interests of other groups, either reducing profits, or if they are increasing prices, they are going to undermine the interests of consumers. Or if they are reducing wages because they have to get the money from somewhere. Yeah. So they are going to be reducing the interests of the employees. So his point was not that companies shouldn't do anything. He thought that companies should pay their taxes and obey the law. But that somehow they shouldn't allocate resources that don't belong to them otherwise. To other means. And also because they are not trained to do that. This is not true today. Now, big companies, you do have CSR departments, you have people trained. And
thanks to business school like ours where we try to teach our
students. Totally. But that was his point.
Let me ask you, so about asymmetric information, the only way that the shareholders have to know if the company is doing right or not is actually profits, no? It's the only language that the managers are obliged to use, and the only that the shareholders can understand. Is that the way the asymmetric information problem is solved, so to speak?
Yes, for Friedman, yes. But what I could say is that today we are living in a much richer world in terms of information. So if you want to check the ESG, E for environment, S for social, G for government, statistics that companies have. So you can see whether they are performing well in terms of environmental, social, and governance.
As long as the companies don't lie in their reports, obviously.
Well, quite often they do, but then they have these scandals, and then this kind of statistics, and the markets are very sensitive to that because they know how that can affect their profits as well.
Yeah, because reputation is important. Always.
Oh, totally, yeah.
So that was Friedman, no? Basically, he said that in order to be a good person, there are other ways than taking the profits and allocating them for the good of the society in general, no? Mm-hmm. So companies are for what they are for. And so what did Freeman say?
Yeah, what is interesting about Edward Freeman, and he wrote in the early 80s, was that he thought that the main aim of the companies was not to generate profits only. That the companies, they had to be accountable to the whole society because you are employing people, so you are accountable to your employees. You are also getting some inputs from other companies, so you are accountable to them, and then you are accountable to the government and the whole society. You are accountable to your customers. You should not lie to your customers. So what he introduced is this idea that companies, they have a purpose which transcends, which goes beyond the idea of generating profits.
Let me interrupt you there.
Please,
When you I mean, this is a very strong statement because I don't know about your students, but let me ask you that. When you ask your students what companies are for, what is their spontaneous reply? I mean, because I'm guessing that they will say, actually, companies are for making money and not much else. And many students that we are studying management in order to have a good job and to earn a lot of money and possibly to start a company and possibly to try to get rich by starting a company. So my question is, do the students know that there are other purposes to companies besides making money, or what's their spontaneous reply?
That's a good question, yeah. Now, I normally start by introducing Friedman. And sometimes students are so convinced by Friedman that they do not appreciate the stakeholder theory by Freeman. Because they got yes, it's about paying taxes, let the government do the job of helping the poor or whatever, so obeying the law, so that's everything. And I would say there's a share of students who got convinced by Friedman and they don't appreciate what Freeman is saying. But I should emphasize one point, is that Freeman is not about doing good. It's about having a good management of the company. So you are going to prevent that scandals will take place. So if you take care of your stakeholders, and then you can detail that in stakeholder maps, and so you are going to just provide a stable environment for companies
right.
to
and that is in your self-interest. That's in the self-interest of the company in order to make business, which is...
Sure. Yeah, sure. So it's not something which is like totally altruistic, but it's something which tries to bring together the interests of different groups, which seems to be a fair point. And yeah.
Let me ask you this: stakeholder. This is an interesting concept. So, who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is also someone who's actually could be living far away from the place where the company is. I mean, is it only the people who work for the company, or is also anyone who can be affected by the activity of the company?
Good point, yes. Especially for today's big corporations that they depend, they're not companies. We talk about companies, but what we see for big corporations is that they are global supply chains. We have lots of companies working together. So at the very end or at the very beginning of the process, it depends on how you want to see, you might see child labor. You might see some children who are going to be the stakeholders of the company because they are not earning enough for living and they have to work 14 hours a day. So we can understand them as stakeholders as we can understand the final consumers that are paying for cheap clothes or whatever. So we have the whole range. So that's why we have to specify in a stakeholder theory who are the stakeholders. Even the environment can be considered.
No? So, yeah. And so are you objective when you explain the two approaches to this topic, or do you favor one of the two, Freeman or Freeman? Do you think one is right and the other isn't, or?
I try to be as impartial as possible. I put their videos. The two communicate so well. They communicate with conviction about what they are doing. And also because I believe that there's some complementarity between them. I think that some companies, they're not even paying their taxes. They are not even obeying the law. They are lying in courts when they are prosecuted and things. They are hiding. They are concealing information. So, but at the same time, what we see today for big corporations is that they are much more proactive. So Freeman would explain why they engage with sustainable development goals, why they are trying to do things to reduce the gender pay gap. And so there are so many initiatives that companies have that you can only make sense if you understand Freeman. So I think both have a value, and that's why I think I try to be as impartial as possible.
But wouldn't you say that these initiatives don't actually come from the Freeman theory? So once Freeman started to talk about corporate social responsibility, it was then that he produced a cultural change, so to speak, in corporations. Or did corporation already had started to do such actions?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to disentangle, to separate the facts, because I think things go together. Yeah. I think ideas go together with reality, and they help to shape. Think about our students here. when we present these things to them, so and when we request them in their projects that they talk about corporate social responsibility, they are including a little bit. They are saying, oh, perhaps my company should have a code of conduct. Perhaps I should use something in the future just to monitor how I'm doing with my stakeholders. So we help with ideas to shape reality, and the reality
shapes our ideas as well.
Yeah. So
yeah, most of the interesting ideas come at their point of time, as if historical development asks for new ideas, and then that's when they come. So it's difficult to say what started it. No, how did it start?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
Okay, Flavio, time's up.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. I hope we can meet again and have another podcast in this inescapable series of ours. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Catalunya Religió.